Ambassador Kethver stood at the viewing window of his ship, looking down at the blue and green planet below. His forearms were crossed behind his back in the traditional pose of deep thought. The planet was beautiful, he had to admit. Swirling white clouds covered parts of the land masses. Vast oceans reflected the light from the local star. It looked peaceful from up here, but Kethver knew better. He had read the reports. This was Earth, classified as a Class 12 death world, the most dangerous type of planet in the known galaxy. A world where everything tried to kill everything else. A world where the very air could poison most species. A world where the gravity was so strong it would crush the bones of half the Confederation's member races. And somehow, intelligent life had evolved here, not just survived, but thrived. Sir? His aide, Yimtal, approached with careful steps. Even on their own ship, with artificial gravity set to comfortable levels, Yimtal moved like he was afraid the floor might collapse. The human delegation has arrived. They are waiting in meeting room 7. Kethver turned away from the window. His pale blue skin had turned slightly green, which happened when he was nervous. Are the medical teams standing by? Yes, sir. Doctor. Helix has 3 trauma units ready. The atmospheric processors are working at full power to keep the meeting room safe for us. And the humans? Are they comfortable? Yimtal checked his data pad. They said the room is a bit warm and asked if we could turn down the heat. Chief Medical Officer says we cannot go any lower without risking hypothermia for our crew. Kethver sighed. The meeting room was currently set to what his people considered a normal, comfortable temperature. For the humans, it was apparently too warm. He wondered what they considered cold. The walk to meeting room 7 felt longer than usual. Kethver had conducted first contact procedures 43 times in his career. He had met species that breathed methane, species that lived in near absolute zero temperatures, species that fed on radiation. But he had never met a species from Zeo, a death world, let alone a Class 12 death world. The doors to the meeting room slid open with a soft hiss. Inside, 3 humans sat at the conference table, looking perfectly relaxed. They were wearing what appeared to be simple clothing, nothing. That looked like protective gear or life support equipment. They were breathing the ship's atmosphere without any visible difficulty. The leader of the human delegation stood up as Kethver entered. She was tall, with dark hair and brown eyes. Her skin was the color of light wood, and she moved with an easy confidence that made Kethver's assistants step behind him. Ambassador Kethver, she said, extending her hand. I'm Dr. Sarah Chon, representing Earth and the United Nations. Thank you for this meeting. Kethver looked at the extended hand. He knew this was a human greeting custom called a handshake. His briefing materials had warned him to be very careful. Humans often forgot their own strength when greeting other species. There had been incidents. Very carefully, using only the tips of his fingers, Kethver touched Dr. Chun's hand. Even that brief contact told him everything he needed to know. Her hand was warm, much warmer than his own, and he could feel the strength in those fingers, strength that could probably crush his bones without effort. Dr. Chun, he said, pulling his hand back quickly. Welcome aboard the Harmony's Voice. Please sit. We have much to discuss. Dr. Chun sat down, still smiling. The 2 other humans, introduced as Dr. James Rodriguez and Captain Maria Santos, also took their seats. They seemed completely at ease, as if they were attending a business meeting. In their own city, Kethver activated his translation device and cleared his throat. This was the moment he had been dreading. According to Galactic Confederation law, first contact required complete honesty about the nature of the new species. He was required to tell them exactly what they were. Dr. Chun, he began, before we discussed trade agreements or cultural exchanges, There are some things you need to understand about your species and how the galaxy views you. Dr. Chun leaned forward slightly, interested. Of course, Ambassador. We're eager to learn about our place in the galactic community. Kethver wished he could make this easier somehow. But the law was clear. Your species, Dr. Chun, is what we classify as an apex predator from a Class 12 death world. In simple terms, you are among the most dangerous beings the galaxy has ever encountered. There was a moment of silence. Then Dr. Rodriguez laughed. It was a pleasant sound, but it made Kethver's skin turn a deeper shade of green. That's very kind of you to say, Ambassador, Dr. Chun said, smiling. But I think you're being a bit too generous. We're just humans. We're not particularly special. Kethver blinked all 4 of his eyes in sequence, a sign of extreme confusion. In his species, Dr. Chun, I am not being generous. I am stating a biological fact. Your species has physical capabilities that exceed those of every other known intelligent species in the galaxy. Captain Santos spoke up. Ambassador, we appreciate the compliment, but we've seen your technology. Your ships, your medical equipment, your computers, they're all far beyond anything we have. Clearly, your species are much more advanced than we are. Technology and biology are different things, Kethver said, his voice becoming more urgent. Yes, we have advanced technology. But your bodies, your physical forms, are extraordinary. You have pain tolerance levels that would be considered impossible in most species. Your endurance capabilities are beyond measurement. Your strength, your speed, your ability to survive injuries, these things make you incredibly dangerous. Dr. Chun exchanged a glance with her colleagues. Ambassador, I think there might be some confusion here. We're not particularly strong or fast compared to many animals on our own planet. Bears are stronger. Cheetahs are faster. We're just average. Kethver felt a chill run through his body. They were comparing themselves to the other predators on their death world. Of course, they would seem average when compared to creatures that could probably destroy entire space stations. Dr. Chun, he said slowly, what you call average is extraordinary to the rest of the galaxy. Let me give you some examples. The gravity on your planet is 1.0 standard units. Most inhabited worlds in the Confederation have gravity between 0.3 and 0.7 standard units. Your people live every day in gravity that would crush many of our species. But we're used to it, Dr. Rodriguez said. It's just normal for us. The atmospheric composition of your planet includes 21% oxygen, Kethver continued. For most species, anything above 15% oxygen is toxic. Some species consider 10% oxygen to be dangerously high. Really? Captain Santos looked genuinely surprised. We had no idea. Our briefing materials said most planets had breathable atmospheres. Breathable for you, Kethver said, because your species evolved to breathe what most of us would consider poison. Your planet's average temperature ranges are also far beyond what most species can survive. Dr. Chun frowned. Ambassador, I'm starting to think there's been some kind of mistake. We're really not that special. We get hurt, we get sick, we die. We're just regular people. Kethver realized that this was going to be much more difficult than he had anticipated. The humans genuinely did not understand what they were. Their own psychology prevented them from seeing themselves as dangerous. They had evolved on a world so hostile that they considered extreme conditions to be normal. Dr. Chun, he said carefully, have you ever wondered why our initial contact team stayed in orbit for 6 months before making contact? We assumed you were being cautious, she replied. First contact is a big deal, right? You wanted to make sure you understood our culture before meeting us. We were not studying your culture, Kethver said. We were trying to figure out how to survive a meeting with you. The 3 humans looked at each other again. Dr. Chun turned back to Kethver with a confused expression. Ambassador, I think. We need to start over. Because either you're playing some kind of elaborate joke, or there's been a serious misunderstanding somewhere. Kethver looked at the three humans sitting across from him. They were perfectly calm, perfectly friendly, and completely unaware that they were the most terrifying beings he had ever encountered. He realized that the hardest part of first contact was not going to be explaining human capabilities to the galaxy. It is going to be explaining them to the humans themselves. 6 months had passed since the first contact meeting. Dr. Sarah Chun stood in the departure lounge of Luna Station, watching through the massive viewing windows as alien ships came and went. Earth had officially joined the Galactic Confederation, and the cultural exchange programs were in full swing. She carried a simple travel bag and wore comfortable hiking clothes. Her destination was Kepler 442b, home to the Crystalline Collective. It was supposed to be one of the most beautiful worlds in the galaxy, with crystal formations that sang in the wind and created music that could be heard for miles. Dr. Chun? A voice behind her made her turn around. A tall, thin creature approached her. Its body looked like it was made of living crystal, with light refracting through its translucent skin in rainbow patterns. I am Harmony of Seven Tones, your cultural liaison for the visit to our world. Please, call me Sarah, she said, extending her hand for a handshake. Harmony of Seven Tones looked at her hand with what might have been fear. I am sorry, but physical contact between our species requires special safety protocols. Perhaps we could exchange the traditional crystal chiming instead? Sarah lowered her hand, feeling a bit embarrassed. She had forgotten that not all alien species were comfortable with human greetings. Of course. I apologize. Harmony of Seven Tones produced a small crystal from somewhere within its body and tapped it with one finger. It made a beautiful, bell-like sound. Sarah listened politely, not sure what she was supposed to do in response. That was lovely, she sighed. Thank you. Now, before we depart, I must go over some important safety information with you. Harmony of Seven Tones consulted a data device that seemed to be grown into its arm. Our world has a gravitational pull of 1.2 standard units. This is considered extremely dangerous for most species. You will need to wear a gravity compensator suit at all times. Sarah frowned. 1.2 times Earth gravity? That's not too bad. I've trained in higher gravity than that. Harmony of Seven Tones made a sound like wind chimes in a storm. Sarah realized this might be the equivalent of gasping. You have trained in higher gravity? For what purpose? Oh, just fitness training. Some of our athletes train at 1.5 Earth gravity to improve their performance. It's not comfortable, but it's manageable. I see. Harmony of Seven Tones made several notes on its device. There is also the atmospheric composition to consider. Our air contains several compounds that are toxic to most carbon-based life forms. You will need to wear a full environmental suit with its own air supply. What kind of compounds? Sarah asked, genuinely curious. Elevated oxygen levels of 19%, nitrogen compounds, and trace amounts of what you call argon. The combination is considered lethal to most species. Sarah blinked. That sounds almost exactly like Earth's atmosphere. Maybe a bit less oxygen, but not by much. Harmony of Seven Tones stopped moving entirely, which Sarah was learning was a sign of shock in crystalline beings. Your planet has 19% oxygen? About 21%, actually. More wind chime sounds. This is concerning. I must contact the medical team immediately. An hour later, Sarah found herself in a medical bay being examined by 3 different alien doctors. Dr. Helix, the same Confederation medical officer who had been present during first contact, ran scan after scan while muttering to himself. Impossible. He kept saying, "The readings must be wrong." "Is there a problem?" Sarah asked. "Dr. Chun, according to these scans, you could survive on Kepler 442b without any protective equipment at all. This should not be possible." "Well, if the atmosphere is similar to Earth's, that makes sense, doesn't it?" Dr. Helix looked at her with his large, compound eyes. "Dr. Chun, we have been studying your species for 6 months. Every day, we discover something new that should be impossible. Your bone density is 3 times higher than any other known intelligent species. Your muscle fibers are more efficient than anything we have ever documented. Your cardiovascular system could power a small starship." Sarah laughed. "Doctor, I think your instruments might need calibration. I'm just a regular person. I get winded climbing stairs like everyone else." "How many stairs?" Dr. Helix asked. "I don't know. 20 or 30 flights, maybe." Dr. Helix made a choking sound. 20 or 30 flights of stairs? That would put most beings in the hospital. Really? That doesn't seem like very much. 2 hours later, Sarah finally boarded the transport ship to Kepler 442b. Harmony of Seven Tones had insisted that she carry emergency equipment just in case. The gravity compensator, the environmental suit, emergency medical supplies, and something called a planetary evacuation beacon, in case things went very wrong. The journey took 3 days. During that time, Sarah noticed that the ship's crew seemed very nervous around her. They spoke in whispers when they thought she wasn't listening. She caught fragments of conversations about Death World protocols and apex predator containment procedures. She tried to be friendly and helpful, but everything she did seemed to make things worse. When she offered to help carry some heavy equipment, the crew members looked terrified. When she mentioned that the ship's gravity felt a bit light to her, they had emergency meetings about gravitational adaptation syndrome. When they finally arrived at Kepler 442b, Sarah was excited to see the famous crystal formations. The planet was everything she had been told it would be. Massive crystalline structures rose from the surface like frozen music. The whole landscape sparkled and sang in the alien sunlight. "It's beautiful," she said to Harmony of Seven Tones as they prepared to disembark. "Thank you. Now, please remember to put on your protective equipment before we open the airlock." Sarah looked at the pile of gear she was supposed to wear. The gravity compensator alone weighed almost as much as she did. The environmental suit was bulky and would make it difficult to move around. Is all of this really necessary? I mean, you said the atmosphere is similar to Earth's. Safety protocols, Dr. Chun. We cannot take any risks. Sarah sighed and started putting on the equipment. It took 20 minutes to get everything on and properly calibrated. When she was finally ready, she felt like she was wearing a small space station. They stepped out of the ship together. Sarah immediately noticed that the gravity felt perfectly normal. The air, what little of it she could sample through her suit's sensors, smelled clean and fresh. The temperature was mild and pleasant. "This is wonderful," she said, "but I really don't think I need all this equipment." "Please, Dr. Chun, the equipment stays on." They spent the morning touring the crystal gardens, where the crystalline collective grew their food. Sarah learned that her guides absorbed nutrients directly from the crystal formations through their feet. It was fascinating, but the heavy equipment made it difficult for her to keep up. During lunch, disaster struck. A group of young crystalline collective members were playing near a crystal formation when one of them slipped and fell. The young one hit the ground hard and didn't get up. Injured. Harmony of Seven Tones chimed in distress. Medical emergency. Without thinking, Sarah ran toward the injured child. The heavy gravity compensator made her movements awkward, but she managed to reach the scene quickly. The young crystalline being was conscious but clearly in pain. One of its arms had a visible crack running through the crystal structure. "Don't move," Sarah said gently. "Help is coming." The young being looked up at her with eyes like cut diamonds. "Are you the human?" it asked in a voice like tiny bells. "Yes, I'm Sarah. What's your name?" "I am Song of Morning Light." "Are you really from a death world?" "Well, that's what everyone keeps telling me." Song of Morning Light tried to sit up and winced in pain. Without thinking, Sarah reached out to steady the child. Her hands, still in the bulky gloves of the environmental suit, were clumsy. She gripped too hard. There was a sound like glass breaking. Song of Morning Light screamed. Sarah looked down in horror. The child's other arm now had cracks running through it, where she had tried to help. Her gentle touch, even through protective gloves, had been enough to cause serious injury to a being made of living crystal. "I'm sorry," Sarah said, pulling her hands away. "I'm so sorry. I was just trying to help." Harmony of Seven Tones arrived with the medical team a moment later. They saw the additional damage and immediately began treating both of Song of Morning Light's arms. The medical team worked quickly, applying some kind of crystal healing compound to the cracks. "What happened?" Harmony of Seven Tones asked. "I touched the child," Sarah said, her voice shaking. "I just tried to steady them, and I made it worse." The lead medic looked up from his work. "Dr. Chun, the pressure sensors in your gloves show that you applied what you probably thought was a gentle touch. However, that gentle touch generated approximately 340 pounds of pressure per square inch." "That's impossible," Sarah said. "I barely touched them." For a human, it was barely touching. For one of us, it was like being squeezed by industrial machinery. Sarah stood there staring at her hands. These were the same hands she used to pet cats, to shake hands with friends, to hold babies. She had never thought of them as weapons before. The medical team finished their work and carefully moved Song of Morning Light to a transport vehicle. The young being would recover, they said, but it would take several weeks for the crystal structure to heal properly. As they flew back to the landing site, Harmony of Seven Tones was. Dr. Sarah Chun stood at the edge of the excavation site on Vorthik Prime, looking down into the massive crater that held the ruins of an ancient battlefield. 3 months had passed since the incident on Kepler 442b, and she had spent most of that time trying to understand what it meant to be human in a galaxy full of fragile aliens. The archaeological expedition was supposed to be a safe, peaceful project. Representatives from 12 different species were working together to uncover artifacts from a war that had ended 10,000 years ago. It was meant to be a symbol of cooperation between humans and the Galactic Confederation. Dr. Chun called Professor Zixtal the expedition leader. He was a member of the Ethereal Collective, a species that looked like walking starlight, held together by will alone. "We are ready to begin the descent to level 7. Sarah nodded and checked her equipment one more time. Unlike her previous trips, she now carried only basic tools and wore simple protective clothing. She had learned that the elaborate safety equipment the aliens insisted on actually made her more dangerous. Not less. The team of 26 researchers began their careful descent into the ruins. Sarah noticed that she was the only one who didn't need assistance from the automated lift system. The gravity on Vorthik Prime was 1.3 times Earth standard, which made most of the alien team members move slowly and carefully. For Sarah, it just felt like she was carrying a heavy backpack. "Fascinating," said Dr. Krethmal, a reptilian historian from the Scaled Dominion. "These weapon scars on the walls suggest the ancient Vorthik military used plasma cannons with an energy output of at least 50,000 units. "What does that mean in practical terms?" Sarah asked. "Enough energy to vaporize most modern buildings," replied Ambassador Kethver, who had insisted on joining the expedition despite his fear of humans. The ancient Vorthik were clearly a warrior species. They continued deeper into the ruins. Sarah found the architecture interesting, but not particularly threatening. The corridors were wide and tall, designed for beings much larger than any current. Galactic species. Scorch marks and blast craters covered the walls, telling the story of a final, desperate battle. "The energy readings here are still quite high," reported Dr. Yim Tal, Kethver's aide, as he checked his instruments. "We should be careful not to disturb anything that might still be active." "Active?" Sarah asked. "After 10,000 years?" "Ancient. Military technology was built to last," explained Professor Zixtal. "The Vorthek were known for their extremely durable defensive systems." As if summoned by his words, a low humming sound began to echo through the corridors. Red lights started flashing along the walls. The team stopped moving, looking around nervously. "What's happening?" Dr. Chun asked. "Motion sensors," Dr. Krethmal sighed, his voice tight with fear. "We must have triggered some kind of security system." The humming grew louder. Panels in the walls began to slide open, revealing weapon ports that glowed with menacing red light. Professor Zixtal consulted his datapad frantically. "According to our research, the Vorthek designed their final defenses to activate only when faced with extreme threats," he said. "The system was programmed to respond to apex predators and large military forces." "But we're just archaeologists," Sarah said. "We're not a threat to anyone." The first energy blast answered her question. A beam of superheated plasma shot from one of the wall ports, striking Dr. Yin Tal directly in the chest. The alien screamed and collapsed, his body smoking from the impact. "Defensive positions!" Ambassador Kethver shouted, but there was nowhere to go. The corridor was long and straight, with no cover except for some fallen debris. More weapons activated. Energy beams crisscrossed the corridor as the ancient defense system began its work. Sarah watched in horror as alien after alien was struck down. Dr. Krethmal took a plasma bolt to the shoulder and fell, unable to move. Professor Zixtal's starlight form flickered and dimmed as multiple beams passed through him. Sarah felt something hit her in the back. The impact knocked her forward a few steps, and she smelled burning fabric. She turned around to see that one of the plasma cannons had scored a direct hit on her. Her shirt was ruined, and she could feel heat on her skin, but otherwise she seemed fine. "Sarah." Ambassador Kethver called out from where he was hiding behind a piece of rubble. "Are you injured?" "I don't think so," she called back, checking herself for damage. There was a red mark on her back where the plasma had hit, like a mild sunburn. "It stings a little, but I'm okay." Another plasma bolt hit her in the arm. This one tore through her sleeve and left a black mark on her skin, but again, no serious damage. Sarah looked around the corridor. More than half the expedition team was down, killed or badly wounded by weapons that seemed to barely affect her. The defense system thinks we're invaders, she realized. It's trying to kill us. "Sarah, get down." Kethver shouted as another volley of energy beams swept the corridor. But Sarah didn't get down. Instead, she started walking toward the source of the weapons fire. Plasma bolts hit her repeatedly, burning her clothes and leaving painful marks on her skin, but not stopping her. She could hear the alien survivors crying out in fear and pain behind her. "What are you doing?" Professor Zixtal's weak voice called out. "I'm going to turn this thing off," Sarah said, pulling a piece of metal debris from the wall where it had been blasted loose. The metal was still hot from the plasma fire, but she could hold it without serious injury. She reached the first weapon port and jammed the metal into the mechanism. Sparks flew as the system tried to continue firing, but the weapon was blocked. She moved to the next port, then the next, methodically disabling each gun as it fired at her. "Impossible," she heard Dr. Krethmal whisper from somewhere behind. The larger weapons were harder to disable. Sarah had to climb up the walls to reach some of them, her hands finding holes in the blast-damaged stone it would have been impossible for most species to use. The plasma fire was getting more intense as the system detected that its smaller weapons were being destroyed. A massive energy cannon emerged from the ceiling, charging up for what looked like a devastating attack. Sarah grabbed a chunk of fallen masonry that must have weighed several 100 pounds and hurled it at the weapon with all her strength. The rock struck the cannon dead center, crushing the mechanism and sending sparks showering down. "Sarah!" Cuthbert's voice was full of panic. "Behind you!" She turned to see 3 combat drones emerging from hidden compartments in the walls. They were roughly humanoid in shape, made of the same dark metal as the weapon systems. Red targeting. Lasers painted her chest as they raised their weapons. The first drone fired a projectile weapon that hit Sarah in the stomach. The impact felt like being punched very hard as she doubled over for a moment. But when she straightened up, she was still standing. The projectile had penetrated her skin, but hadn't gone deep enough to cause serious damage. "You've got to be kidding me," she muttered, and charged at the nearest drone. Her first punch dented its metal chassis. Her second punch tore its arm off. The drone tried to back away, but Sarah grabbed it by the head and twisted until something inside broke with a loud snap. The other 2 drones opened fire with everything they had. Energy beams, projectile weapons, and something that looked like a flamethrower all hit Sarah at once. She stumbled but kept moving, fighting through the pain and the smoke rising from her burned clothing. She tackled the second drone, and they both went down hard. The impact would have crushed most beings, but Sarah rolled away and got back to her feet. The drone didn't. The third drone had backed itself into a corner, still firing frantically. Sarah walked through its weapon's fire, grabbed it by the legs, and smashed it against the wall until it stopped moving. Silence fell over the corridor. The only sounds were the groans of wounded aliens and the crackling of damaged electronics. Sarah stood in the middle of the battlefield, her clothes in tatters, her skin marked with burns and cuts, but very much alive. She turned around to see the surviving members of the expedition staring at her in absolute terror. Ambassador Kethvar was pressed against the wall, his pale blue skin now completely white with shock. Professor Zixtal's starlight form was barely visible, dimmed too. "Almost nothing. Is everyone okay?" Sarah asked, walking back toward them. Most of the aliens flinched away from her as she approached. Dr. Krethmo, still lying wounded on the ground, spoke in a voice barely above a whisper. "You just survived weapons designed to kill the galaxies. Most dangerous predators. You disabled a military defense system with your bare hands. You destroyed 3 combat drones that were built to fight wars." Sarah looked down at herself. She was hurt, certainly. The burns stung, and she was probably going to need medical attention. But she was functional, mobile, and ready to keep going, if necessary. "They weren't that tough," she said honestly. "The plasma guns hurt, but not that much. The drones were just machines. I've seen scarier things in Earth's nature documentaries." Ambassador Kethvar made a sound like a dying animal. "Sarah," he said, his voice shaking, "do you finally understand what we have been trying to tell you?" Sarah looked around at the devastation in the corridor, at the alien bodies scattered across the floor, at the weapon systems she had destroyed without thinking, at the fear in the eyes of the survivors. The emergency session of the Galactic Confederation Council had been in progress for 18 hours. Representatives from 847 different species filled the massive chamber on the neutral world of Consensus Prime. The air was thick with the sounds of hundreds of different languages being translated simultaneously. Chancellor Vexthara of the Ethereal Collective stood at the central podium, her starlight form flickering with stress. In her 3,000 years of life, she had never seen. The council in such a state of panic. "Order!" she called out, her voice amplified across the chamber. "We must have order." But order was the last thing anyone wanted to discuss. Ever since the news of the Vorthic Prime incident had spread across the galaxy, chaos had followed. Trade routes were being closed. Tourist destinations were canceling human visits. 3 entire species had requested emergency relocations to put more distance between themselves and Earth. "The facts are undeniable," announced Senator Krolix of the Scaled Dominion, his reptilian features twisted with anger. A single human survived weapons that killed or wounded 23 trained researchers. She destroyed military-grade equipment with her bare hands. She did this while barely breaking a sweat. Murmurs of fear and agreement rippled through the chamber. Chancellor Vexthara tried to maintain control, but the situation was beyond anything the Council had ever faced. "Furthermore," Senator Krolix continued, "we have received disturbing reports from across the galaxy about previous human interactions. The incident on Kepler 442b was not isolated. There have been dozens of similar events." He activated a holographic display that showed incident reports from across known space. On Rigel 7, a human tourist pulled a drowning aquatic council member from a lake. The human had to swim through water that was boiling hot by most species standards. She thought it was just a bit warm. On New Centauri, a human chef has been unknowingly serving food that contains compounds toxic to 12 different species. The humans who eat there regularly show no ill effects. What about the construction incident on Tau Ceti Station? Called out Representative Ilix of the Silicon Confederacy. "Ah, yes," Senator Krolix said grimly. "A human engineer named Marcus Thompson was working on reactor maintenance when a radiation leak occurred. By the time the emergency team arrived, Thompson had fixed the leak while standing in a radiation field that should have killed him in minutes. He complained that the work environment was a bit stuffy and asked if they could improve the ventilation." The chamber erupted in frightened chatter. Chancellor Vexthara could hear fragments of conversation in dozens of languages, all expressing the same basic fear. How could they have allowed these creatures into their civilization? "The most disturbing part," Senator Krolix said, raising his voice above the noise, "is that the humans genuinely do not understand what they are doing. They think these incidents are normal. They believe they are being helpful." Ambassador Kethver, who had been sitting quietly in the observer section, stood up. His pale blue skin was still showing stress colors from his experience on Vorthic Prime. "I request permission to address the Council," he said. Chancellor Vexthara nodded. "The Council recognizes Ambassador Kethver of the Zephyrian Alliance." Kethver walked slowly to the podium, his 4 arms trembling slightly. "Honored representatives, I have spent more time with humans than perhaps any other being in this chamber. I was present at first contact. I have traveled with them, worked with them, and nearly died alongside them. And I can tell you with absolute certainty that Senator Krolix is correct. The humans do not understand what they are. Then how do we make them understand?" demanded Representative Quillen of the Hive Collective. "How do we protect ourselves from beings who can accidentally destroy our children with a friendly touch?" "That is the question," Kethver said sadly. "We told them the truth from the very beginning. We explained their capabilities in clear scientific terms, but their own psychology prevents them from believing it. They have lived their entire evolutionary history surrounded by creatures that are, by galactic standards, impossibly dangerous. To them, surviving in conditions that would kill us is simply normal life." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These were not conquerors or invaders. These were not even deliberately dangerous beings. They were simply the products of a world so hostile that they had no frame of reference for how fragile the rest of the galaxy was. What does our xenobiology department say about Earth? Chancellor Vexthara asked. Dr. Zimlex of the Scientific Consortium activated another holographic display. This one showed Earth in all its terrible beauty. Blue oceans, green continents, swirling white clouds. It looked peaceful from space. We have completed our full analysis of the human homeworld, Dr. Zimlex said. The results are unprecedented. Earth is classified as a Class 12 death world, the highest threat rating in our system. Every single major ecosystem on the planet contains life forms that would be considered apex predators on most worlds. The display zoomed in to show various Earth creatures. These sharks hunt in packs and can detect blood from miles away. These tigers can leap 30 feet and have claws capable of tearing through most known materials. These bears weigh up to 800 pounds and can run faster than most galactic ground vehicles. And the humans live alongside these creatures? Asked Representative Morth of the Peaceful Collective. Not just alongside them, Dr. Zimlex said. The humans hunt them for sport. They have domesticated some of the smaller predators as pets. Children play in the same environments where these creatures live. The display changed to show Earth's weather patterns. The planet experiences regular catastrophic storms with wind speeds that would destroy most of our cities. Earthquakes that would crack the foundations of our strongest buildings. Volcanic eruptions that release more energy than our most powerful weapons. How do they survive? Whispered Representative Quillen. They have adapted to survive, Dr. Zimlex sighed. Their bone density is 3 times galactic average. Their muscle efficiency is unprecedented. Their pain tolerance and healing capabilities are beyond our understanding. They have redundant organ systems, backup circulation pathways, and emergency metabolic processes that activate under stress. In simple terms, Senator Krolik said, they are biological war machines designed by natural selection to survive in conditions that would exterminate any other known species. Chancellor Vexthara looked around the chamber. Fear was written on every face, in every posture, in every gesture of the assembled representatives. But there was something else, too. A growing realization that they faced a problem with no easy solution. Have we considered simply asking them to leave? Suggested Representative Ilix. On what grounds? Ambassador Kethfer asked. They have violated no laws, broken no treaties. Every incident has been accidental. They are peaceful, friendly, and genuinely trying to be good neighbors. But they are killing us, Representative Morth said quietly. Not on purpose, but they are killing. You is just by being themselves. 3 diplomatic incidents this week alone, Senator Krolix added. A human delegate tried to pat a crystalline collective child on the head during a ceremony. The child will need weeks of repair. A human scientist offered to help an aquatic. Council researcher carry equipment. The researcher is still in the hospital with crushed manipulator appendages. A human tourist wanted to shake hands with everyone at a cultural festival on Beta Proxima. The medical facilities are still treating the casualties. And in every case, Kethfer said, the humans were genuinely confused about why anyone was hurt. They thought they were being polite and friendly. Chancellor Vexthara felt the weight of the decision pressing down on her. The Confederation had been built on principles of inclusion, cooperation, and mutual respect. But how could they include a species that was physically incompatible with the rest of the galaxy? What are the humans doing about this situation? She asked. Dr. Sarah Chun has been working with their government to develop new protocols, Kethfa reported. They are creating training programs to help humans understand their own capabilities. They are establishing safety guidelines for interactions with other species. But the process is slow, and accidents keep happening. Meanwhile, Senator Krolik said, our people live in fear. Parents are afraid to let their children attend multicultural events. Researchers refuse to work on projects that include humans. Trade negotiations are being canceled because no one wants to be in the same room with them. The irony, Dr. Zimlex observed, is that humans genuinely want to help. Their psychology drives them to protect and assist weaker beings. But in a galaxy where they are the strongest beings, their attempts to help often cause more damage than malicious intent would. So what do we do? Chancellor Vexthara asked the chamber. How do we solve this problem? The silence stretched for long minutes. Finally, a small voice spoke from the back of the chamber. Representative Pixtel of the Minor Worlds Alliance, one of the smallest and most fragile species in the Confederation. Maybe, she said hesitantly, the question is not how to protect ourselves from them. Maybe the question is how to teach them to protect us from themselves. The chamber considered this. It was not exclusion or exile. It was not fear. 1 year had passed since the formation of the Human Integration Safety Commission. Ambassador Kethver sat in his hospital bed on Medical Station Sanctuary 7, looking out through the reinforced windows at the stars beyond. His injuries from the Vorthic Prime incident had healed, but the doctors said he would need regular treatment for radiation exposure for the rest of his life. The irony was not lost on him. The radiation that was slowly killing him had barely bothered Dr. Sarah Chun. She had walked through it like it was nothing more than warm sunlight. A soft chime indicated someone was at his door. Come in, he called. Dr. Sarah Chun entered, carrying a small bag and moving very carefully. She had learned a lot in the past year about how to exist in a galaxy full of fragile beings. Every step was measured. Every gesture was controlled. She moved like someone carrying a box of explosives, which, Kethfor reflected, was probably an accurate comparison. Hello, Ambassador, she said, stopping a safe distance from his bed. How are you feeling today? Better, thank you. Please, sit down. He gestured to a chair that had been specially reinforced for human visitors. Sarah sat down slowly, keeping her hands in her lap. I brought you something, she said, reaching into her bag with extreme care. She pulled out a small crystal that chimed softly in the sterile air of the medical bay. It's from Song of Morning Light, she explained. The young one I accidentally injured on Kepler 442b. They wanted me to give this to you as a get-well gift. Kethver accepted the crystal carefully. It was beautiful, with light refracting through its structure in rainbow patterns. How is Song of Morning Light doing? Much better. The healing process took longer than expected, but they're fully recovered now. They even asked if they could visit Earth someday. Sarah smiled, but it was a sad expression. I had to explain why that might not be a good idea. And how did they take that? They understood. That's the hardest part, isn't it? Everyone understands. No one blames us. But everyone is afraid. Kethver set the crystal on his bedside table, where it continued to chime softly. How are the integration protocols working? Sarah sighed. Better than we hoped, but not as well as we need. The new training programs are helping. Humans are learning to be more aware of their strength, their durability, their everything. But accidents still happen. I heard about the incident on New Geneva Station. That wasn't entirely an accident, Sarah said, her voice becoming tight. Marcus Thompson, the engineer who fixed the reactor leak on Tau Ceti Station. He was attacked by 3 armed robbers. While visiting New Geneva, they shot him 14 times with weapons that should have killed him instantly. And he subdued all 3 attackers without seriously injuring them. At least, not seriously by human standards. By galactic standards, Sarah trailed off. How badly were they hurt? 2 broken arms, 3 cracked ribs, and 1 concussion. Marcus thought he was being gentle. He was trying not to hurt them, because he knew they were fragile. But when someone is shooting at you, it's hard to remember to pull your punches. Kethfer nodded. This was the problem they had been wrestling with for a year. How do you teach someone to be gentle when their natural reflexes are designed for survival on a death world? The Commission is recommending new restrictions on human travel, he said quietly. I know. Dr. Rodriguez and I have been working with them on the guidelines. No more than 2 humans per station. No humans on worlds with gravity below 0.8 standard. No humans at cultural events involving physical contact. Sarah's voice was bitter. We're becoming prisoners of our own biology. It's not permanent, Kethfer said, though he wasn't sure he believed it. Once we understand better how to manage the risks. Ambassador, can I ask you something? Sarah interrupted. Of course. Do you ever regret making contact with us? Kethfer was quiet for a long moment, considering the question. In the past year, he had seen his own people become increasingly isolated from human populations. He had watched trade agreements fall apart because alien negotiators were too afraid to be in the same room as humans. He had received reports of entire colonies requesting relocation to avoid human shipping routes. But he had also seen something else. He had seen humans working 18-hour days to develop better safety protocols. He had seen them voluntarily restrict their own movements to protect others. He had seen Dr. Chun spend months learning to control her strength so precisely that she could handle a soap bubble without breaking it. No, he said finally. I don't regret it. But I do wish we had found a better way to make you understand what you are. We told ourselves we were listening, Sarah said. But we weren't, were we? We heard the words, but we couldn't believe them. Even when you showed us the data, explained our capabilities in scientific terms, warned us repeatedly about our dangerous nature, we just dismissed it. Your psychology is designed to help you survive on Earth, Kethfer observed. On your world, thinking of yourself as dangerous would be a handicap. You need confidence, not caution, to survive among creatures that can kill you. But we're not on Earth anymore. No, you're not. Sarah stood up carefully and walked to the window. She moved with the controlled grace that all humans had learned over the past year. Every human in the galaxy now moved like they were made of carefully contained explosives. The worst part, she said, is the children. What do you mean? Human. Children born on other worlds. They're growing up learning to be afraid of themselves. Learning that their natural instincts are wrong. Learning that being human means being dangerous. Sarah pressed her hand against the reinforced window. Even that gentle touch was enough to make the material creak slightly. We're raising a generation that sees their own species as a threat. Perhaps that's necessary, Kethfer said gently. I know it's necessary, but it breaks my heart. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching ships come and go from the medical station. Most of them gave the human transport vessels a wide berth, even though the new safety protocols made such caution unnecessary. Ambassador, Sarah said eventually, I have something to tell you. The Human Integration Safety Commission has made a decision. Kethfer felt a chill run through his body. What kind of decision? We're establishing permanent colonies on the edge of known space. Worlds where humans can live and work without constantly worrying about accidentally hurting someone. We'll maintain trade and diplomatic relations with the Confederation, but most humans will voluntarily relocate to these new settlements. That's essentially exile. It's voluntary exile, Sarah corrected. No one is forcing us to leave. But the truth is, most humans want to go. We're tired of being afraid of ourselves. We're tired of seeing fear in the eyes of everyone we meet. We want to be normal again, even if it means being normal somewhere else. Kethfer felt a deep sadness settle over him. This was not how first contact was supposed to work. Species were supposed to come together, learn from each other, grow stronger through cooperation. Instead, the galaxy's most well-intentioned species was choosing exile to protect everyone else. How many will stay? He asked. A few thousand, maybe. Diplomats, researchers, people who can't bear to leave. They'll continue working on integration, protocols and safety measures. But the majority will go. And the children, the ones born here, they can choose when they're old enough. Some will probably stay. They understand the galaxy in ways we never could. They know how to be human among aliens. Sarah returned to her chair and sat down with the same careful precision. There's something else. Something the Commission asked me to tell you personally. What? We want to thank you, all of you, for trying so hard to make this work, for being patient with us, for never giving up on the idea that we could find way to coexist. You don't need to thank us for that. Yes, we do. You told us the truth from the very beginning. We just weren't ready to hear it. And even after we finally understood, even after we proved how dangerous we could be, you still tried to find a way to make it work. That means more to us than you know. Kethver picked up the crystal gift from Song of Morning Light. It's gentle. Chiming filled the quiet room with something that might have been hope. Will we stay in contact? He asked. The humans and the rest of the galaxy? Always, Sarah said firmly. We're not disappearing. We're just creating some space, literally. Maybe someday, when we've learned better control, when the galaxy has learned better ways to live with us, we can try again. And if that day never comes? Sarah was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was soft but determined. Then we'll remain friends at a distance. We'll trade with each other, share knowledge, work together on projects that don't require physical proximity. We'll be the galaxy's protectors from afar, ready to help if something truly dangerous threatens the Confederation. The galaxy's most dangerous beings becoming its guardians. Kethver mused. There's a certain poetry to that. We told ourselves we just wanted to belong, Sarah said. But maybe belonging isn't about being in the same place. Maybe it's about caring for each other, even when you have to stay apart. She stood up to leave, moving with that careful control that had become second nature to every human in the galaxy. Goodbye, Ambassador. Thank you for everything you tried to do for us. Goodbye, Dr. Chun. Thank you for showing us what see.